But I did manage to get into writing school. And on the very first day, they said to us, we all need to learn about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And there was directors and writers and the makeup people, and it was just fundamental to how all of these things happen. And so he explained it to us, and literally it was like a life-changing moment. Like I felt chills through my hands. I knew that this was something I needed to know more about. And in the next moment, while I'm still like high, he said, and all story from all time is a hero's journey. And I was like, wait a minute, that can't be right. Like we can't all be trying to like fight evil, right? There's got to be something more to life. So I was like a dog with a bone. Like I wouldn't stop until I figured out something else. So I studied women's studies and mythology at university. I went to Switzerland and studied at the Jungian Institute there. But I mostly watched like a ton of movies that were not hero stories and tried to figure out sort of in my own way, like what made sense to me. Like if I look inside myself, what is this story saying? And I came up with some repeated motifs, some beats that seemed to be happening again and again. And I put them together, trusted that feeling of like chills, resonance. I think I'd love to know how many people get that feeling when you know you're touching something that is real or truth to you. If it's true to you, if you've had that feeling, put one of those claps or something in the reaction ones, because I would love to know how many people have felt that. Yeah, or this is good too. Because I find the more that I try to think about it and connect to it, actually the more expert I am at connecting to those moments. So it's really, really important that we become conscious of that. So anyway, I took a bunch of years. Thanks to my ex-husband, I was funded, and I just kept doing it. And then I completed the book, and I was way too shy to do anything with it. But I got this fortune that said, "If not today, when?" And so I cold called the publisher of my dreams, Michael Weesey Productions, and they said, "That sounds really good. Send it to us." And within a week, they said, "We'll take it." So it sort of shows that if you really put yourself out there, sometimes the stars align and your energy matches what's meant to be done. So that sounds very woohoo, but that's the way it happened for me.
So it feels like you were sort of, you were obviously in the right place at the right time, and you were led down a path. And
it started with my own path. I don't think it felt like the right time, certainly for the movie industry, actually, until I met Elliot and I realized that indie film, like these are stories of personal growth, small budgets. Like you can change, like the change in a story is on a person's face. You don't need anything to explode or to travel to an alien world to have a truly engaging story. And so that I got all these opportunities to talk to indie writers through Elliot.
Fantastic. And how long did it take you to write the book?
5 years.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But it is, I mean, it's an absolutely wonderful read. I mean, I've recently read The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and I know it's a classic, and I know it was written in 1949, but I personally found it difficult to follow, actually. So I understood the myth, and I understood it, but I found it difficult. I found it a difficult read, whereas yours is just, well, it's sublime. You condense so much information in here, but you say it in such a sort of succinct, very sort of hands-on way, which obviously is so important for us as storytellers. So thank you.
Yeah. A lot of people say that you can't like sit down and just plow through it. It's meant to be read where you like an old Victorian story or something. Like you read some, you think about it, and it sinks in, and then that makes the next part even more interesting. So
yeah. So in your book, Kim, you helpfully you walk through the contrast between the hero and the virgin stories. So can you just, for those that don't know here, can you just sort of talk through how the virgin's promise differs from the hero's journey?
Sure. And I think probably the best way to do that would be for me to do this sort of party trick I often do, which is I will try and tell you within 5 minutes, what is a virgin story? So that you can sort of have that in your heart and your mind when we do the contrast. So, and I want you to hold a story in your head because I'm going to do the generic version. So the Joker is a virgin story, Black Swan, La La Land, The Shape of Water. Let me see, I always like forget, Moonlight, Pretty Woman. Like hopefully there's one of those stories that you can relate to. Moneyball, Hidden Figures. So, okay, so I will tell you that story in 5 minutes. Okay, so the Virgin begins in a dependent world where her environment tells her who she is and how she's supposed to behave. And what happens is that there is some part of her that is forced to be small, or she's asleep to who she actually is. So she's paying a price for conforming to that dependent world that she finds herself in, until one day she gets an opportunity to shine and she takes it. And often this happens by some sort of almost alchemy, where she takes something physical and that allows her entree into a new world. In other words, the aspiring dancer Billy Elliot gets the ballet shoes, or if you dreamed of being an artist, then you meet a painter who lets you tag along. And also it can be sexuality as well. So it can be about taking off your clothes as opposed to dressing up in this other way of dancer artist. And so what happens is that now she wants more. And so she creates a secret world because she's not ready to totally explode her dependent world. This is full of people that she loves. So she decides to create this secret world, populates it with friends, and has this space to play, space to make some mistakes and laugh at herself, to go in circles and wait until something inside her feels that connection. She's growing and knowing who she is authentically. But she doesn't give up that dependent world and live completely in her secret world. She's going back and forth between the two. She's learning in this kind of iterative process who she is, and by contrast of who she has to be in the other world, she's actually learning more about herself. But she's also learning how to build a bridge between those two worlds. But at some point, she grows to the point where she no longer fits one of those worlds. And the two worlds collide, and she is caught shining, and there is a backlash. But in that moment, she questions, why did she believe something in the beginning that she had to be small for some reason? And whatever that reason was, she gives it up. She realizes, no, I don't actually have to believe that I'm only lovable when I'm small. And so the kingdom goes into chaos. She stood up to them, and suddenly everybody's like, well, laws are being broken and other people are going to start rebelling and everything's gone crazy. And in that moment, she's wandering in the wilderness. She's trying to figure out, should I go back and be small? But this time knowing what it feels like to be authentic, or do I go forward, but I have no idea what that would look like? I'd be walking into chaos and have to be comfortable with that discomfort. But she decides, I'm not really living if I'm not being authentic, if I'm not being true to myself. So she chooses her light. And somebody sees that when she stands up and she's being her authentic self, that is needed. The kingdom needs that. And so it's what I call the reorder or the rescue. And the world adjusts itself to make a place for her to be herself. And in the end, the kingdom is brighter because either it needed the gift that she was bringing, or unconditional love now exists in the kingdom, or a whole bunch of people are saying, I want to be authentic, and it's seeded all this creativity throughout the land. So that is basically a virgin story. And I hope you recognized it from one of the stories you were holding in your heart. Okay, so this is when it's always awkward not to be in live with people, it's like into the silence, I will say. Here's the comparison between the hero story and the virgin story. So thank you. I can see the little comments. Okay, so first of all, the hero starts in a world, this ordinary world that is good. Basically, it's his mother, it's a lovely homeland. And then there is something that is threatening that. It's a lack of resources or evil forces coming, or there's been a wrong that has to be righted, or it becomes this little insidious thing that keeps growing and means more injustice in the land. So it's this external thing, and the hero goes to a foreign land to fight it, kill it, so he can return to the ordinary world, and it can exist in comfort into the future. Okay, so the virgin exists in a world where she is at odds with her environment, and she needs to become herself. So she is actually trying to transform herself and exist differently in that world. Home is not perfect, that to be preserved and protected. This is about growth, and her personal growth is going to inspire the community's personal growth or collective growth, even though at this point it doesn't know that it would be better off, which is the interesting part. The other thing is there's something evil that has to be killed or made inert or made, like contained. In the virgin story, it's not good or bad. It's whether you are conscious and connected, and collectively conscious and connected to what you value, and actually living by that. So the antagonist doesn't get killed. The antagonist grows along with the virgin, usually inspired by the virgin's growth. The antagonist decides out of love to change so that the virgin has a place to live. Other differences. The hero story needs and this is the one I get the most pushback from, a tangible goal. You need to, at the beginning, the audience needs to know, I am trying to go here. It's a visible, measurable goal. Otherwise, nobody knows like why you're doing what you're doing, right? And then you have to keep mounting obstacles so that getting there is more amazing, right? He's more brave, more ability actually to control his emotions, right? And when I say his, I want to be really clear about this, and her, is that I'm talking about the masculine and the feminine, not male and female. We all have, and I have a huge heroic side, like we all have this ability to be both and need both. So I want to be I'm not gender stereotyping, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So the hero needs to control his feelings and take action anyway in the physical world. So that's bravery. Basically, that's our definition of bravery. It's not that you don't feel fear, it's that you control it and you move forward anyway. And when there is a true external danger, that's exactly what you need to do. The virgin is about welcoming all feelings, all beliefs that are current today, even about events that happened in the past, and growing through them. You first have to make some choices about which ones you want to grow in this moment. And then through accepting them, feeling the feelings, following where it takes you, and recognizing how you respond to that, when you take in the world with the eyes of love, and then try and turn that back into some physical action in the world, you're growing, basically. So that's the big difference. One's trying to control feelings and take action. The other is trying to absorb feelings, grow inside, and then show how that growth is manifesting itself to make it ever more real in your actions in life. I think that's probably enough to take in for now.
That's so wonderful, Kim. And the comments that are coming through on the chat. So Chloe says, wow, it seems like the Virgin story is not only a structure, but also a mindset. Very beautiful. Romaine says, it particularly resonates with people now, a time when people are soul searching, at the same time taking chances, being brave. So, it is such a, it's such a thing of what we're going through at the moment. And this is just the perfect story, well, beyond structure, as people say, but, the way we can tell our stories. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. And it'd probably be useful because I get a lot of angst people feel over the title, Virgin's Promise. And it comes from the Jungian word virgin for that discovery of self in an internal way. How do I know how to be myself and bring that into the world? But it also is, its original meaning was like a virgin forest, to know you're of value just for being yourself. And I looked high and low for another word in the English language that meant that. And I think it's very telling that we don't have a lot of words for that at a time when we really need to be able to express this need to be authentic, to belong, to connect to things. And yeah, so I have this word, and I must explain that like a million times,
Mm.
but I like it still. And I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
sorry, Kim. Sorry.
I think it's a word that's been co-opted by patriarchy. And so you really get right to the nub of it when you bring up the word. The second part of the book is promise. Journey to me sounded like you had a goal, you had somewhere you were trying to get. And promise to me has two meanings. One is promise in that you said you would, you have a duty, or promise meaning your potential. And that she basically is making the journey from one to the other. Uh, but it all turned out to be a difficult title for a lot of people. It needs a lot of explaining. That's what I learned. Don't go with the title that needs a lot of explaining. Yeah.
That moves me on quite nicely to, obviously when we think about the Virgin's Promise, we do think about it being female. And as you said before, you have, a lot of male in yourself. And obviously there's yin and yang, male and female in all of us, every single one of us. And Christopher Vogler has obviously written the foreword for your book. And I like what he says. He says, she leaves plenty of room for male heroes to experience their own version of the Virgin's Promise, suggesting the term prince as the male counterpart of virgin.
Right.
So I found that quite interesting. So even though obviously you've used the term virgin, you have found an equivalent for a male version of that as well. So how did you come to that? And can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I started collecting words that would mean the same thing. Like rebel actually is another word for virgin, or star, somebody who believes they have potential and then they rise to that potential. So yeah, there are many words that sort of go with that same energy. Princess was one that I started with, and that you start with a cultural, lots of cultural things that tell you who you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be. And then it's so nice because Prince can go so easily with that for the masculine, feminine counterpart. Just like hero and heroine, those are basically all the masculine journey. So yeah, so I looked at all these words. And then I looked actually at the shadow side of each and tried to figure out what looked like a good companion piece. And the shadow of the hero is the coward, right? Somebody who doesn't rise to the challenge, somebody who doesn't manage to control their fear. And interestingly, in the Virgin story, the shadow sides are words that we really wouldn't want to call anybody, which is interesting. Because if you can't welcome your shadow, become conscious of your shadow, then it's really hard to grow from there. So I found that really fascinating. So words like whore basically are the shadow side of the Virgin, because it means to live in an environment that has devalued you to the degree that you devalue yourself. And that's like, it's crossed that boundary between it's just something happening in the outside, but no, it's now something happening inside me. And that's where the growth is required. And the other is victim, is another word, where you are seen as incapable and wounded, and you become incapable of wounded, partly because there is a certain power related to that. And so it becomes sort of this identity, but it's always disconnecting you from yourself. So I recognize that the word victim was apt, I guess, because it has two meanings, just like Virgin does, in that it means, on one hand, in a hero story, it's the call to action, basically. But the requirement is that the action is only required as long as the virgin or the victim stays victimized. If she gets better, well, maybe it wasn't that bad, or no harm, no foul, like it's, so you have to like really be very hurt and long-term hurt in order to maintain that kind of power. The other version of it is victim means to become disconnected from your own value, and the moment you become conscious of that, is the moment that you have power. You have the power to know yourself and choose who you are and spiral upward, growing more and more into your shining self, your true virgin self, knowing your value for being yourself. So if ever that word victim is used, we really need to be conscious that there are two meanings, one that works for the hero, but there is a totally separate one that works in the world of the feminine, in the world of the internal world of the self.
Fascinating. And the other thing I'd like to sort of explore with you a bit, Kim, is the concept that hero stories are very much embedded in myth. And, you know, in some way, you know, you could say that myth is arguably in many ways male. And, you know, is it the sort of power structures that we've had in the past, that we still have in this world today? And how that sort of contrasts with the virgin story being more of a fairy tale. And I know that in your book, you look at myth versus fairy tale. Can you talk us through that a little bit, please?
Yes. Yeah, that was one of those exciting moments where like pieces started to fall together. Because really, I do believe that that myths are about controlling your feelings and being brave and conquering foreign lands. Basically, it's all about that, and it does it exceptionally well. The fairy tales, because you go into the internal world. In the internal world, it's not about objects and things that you can, you know, the physical dynamics of the external world. So you can have mysteries and magic and talking to animals, and it's almost like a dream world. And it gives you all of these symbols that can connect to our unconscious. And really, that's what it's about. It's about knowing yourself, which actually we've mentioned power a couple of times. And I became really fascinated. Okay, well then what is power? Like if there's both, I'm going to back up a bit because here's my theory. I'll give it to you. So we all have like 3 major journeys that we're supposed to go through in life. We're all supposed to connect to ourselves, and then we're supposed to connect to others, learn how to cross the distance between us and somebody who's not us, that basic interpersonal difference. And then we're all supposed to be part of the cosmos, like part of the bigger community, the bigger world, and know that we're playing a part in that. And we do that in 2 ways, a masculine and a feminine way. So the masculine is external. So your relationship to self is basically, can I face fear, know that I could be killed in the external world someday, and live anyway? So how do I conquer fear and danger? In the internal, it's like, how do I become conscious? How do I know who I am? How do I bring that person into life? And it's the same for relationship to other. It's like, how do I make people safe when I'm responsible for somebody who's like out of my control? That's the masculine. And the feminine is, how can my intuition, my what I can see about that other person, how do I communicate that and let them be their best self in this union? Those types of things. So one's external, one's internal. So if we've got these 2 different worlds, then do we just have one power? Like, is that it? And I say no. I say we have 2 kinds of power. And if we embrace that, we actually have just doubled our power, which is kind of amazing. So one power, the hero's power, and really the only one that you will find in the dictionary, is to assert your will even against resistance. That's what power means. Now, in the feminine world, and I had to go through a lot of, there's a sculpture or an engraving in Delphi, apparently, that says it's about knowing yourself, being yourself, and supporting others in doing the same. And that is power. It's synonymous with empowerment. And I think if we actually can hold those 2 meanings of power in our hearts, then when we come up against a situation, we can say, is this an external danger? Do I need linear power? Do I need to push back against something out there? Or is this actually an internal thing, something that happened in the past, and I have some beliefs that I'm carrying? And in that case, this is an internal power. situation. I need to know myself. I need to be myself, find out who my best self is, and then be that in the world, and then support others in being their best self, so that we all live in these circles of generating more positive energy. Did I answer the question?
Absolutely, and more.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Kim. And I know that, just sort of taking us away from maybe movies, and I'm conscious that, you know, there's a lot of people here who aren't just screenwriters, but who are novelists, poets. I know there's bloggers in the house as well. So I guess it's trying to sort of understand, can your story structure be used equally for more traditional or more modern types of writing, not just film as well?
I love the way you pose that, because people would have said, it's just for novels. It's your internal world, and you have access to that in a novel. And I would argue that it is great in novels. It is great in movies, and I think Elliot shows that with highlighting all the indie films. I also think you can use it in a 1-minute commercial. I've seen them and I get all excited, where you get this feeling of connection and this resonance with something meaningful. And because a lot of the beats can happen just in a look, you know, like we are experts at reading people's faces. And when we allow us to slow down, change the pace of the film, and show people's emotions, Michael Clayton does this quite a bit, where we see his face and we see him growing in that internal contemplation. And Meryl Streep movies, they do this quite a bit as well. I think that it is possible to show every element of this internal growth in a film, and sometimes in a commercial.
Fantastic. And that sort of segues quite nicely into, you've mentioned it earlier tonight as well. Obviously, we're living in times where, you know, a lot of people are very interested in the world of virtual reality. And obviously the times we're living in are almost sort of, you know, bringing that to the fore, because we're mixing less with other people, more in our own little worlds. So I know this is something that you're kind of quite excited about at the moment. So do you have any tips for using the Virgin's Promise in virtual reality type stories?
Yes. Lots of things have been occurring to me. I want the person that's watching the film to feel like they're a part of the film. I think that's the new potential. And it could happen in so many ways. Like, for instance, if the viewer is trying to figure out what happened in their life, sort of It's a Wonderful Life. So you've got somebody that's guiding you through, and you're trying to figure out what was the meaningful moment there, and when will that occur to you, that, aha, here's the thing that really matters in life. So you could create that kind of dialogue with as a spirit that can walk around and view all sorts of things. Like, that would be how the virtual reality fits in part of it. And it does. And here's one of the really interesting things, and why I think virtual reality will work so well with the Virgin's Promise. And it's that the hero's journey has these 12 beats, and you really have to do them in that order, else nothing makes sense. But this is not true for the Virgin story. You can do them in any order, and you will get that same cathartic aha sense of a full story. And I was watching The Wife the other day, because I'm working on actually a new book, rewriting the Virgin's Promise just for indie films. So when I teach courses at Raindance, I will have this brand new selection, because funny enough, the first one I did, I was watching movies with my kids. We were on our own for the first time, and we were watching, and that's when I was starting to notice these patterns. So it was only at the very end that I realized many adults might not like this film selection, so I threw in a few other ones. But this time I'm doing up-to-date, dominantly indie films, and that have a much more adult theme to them. So, okay, so back to what I was saying, which was any order. So I'm watching The Wife for this new book, and I notice I hope people have seen the the wife, and I'm not giving it away if you haven't, but it starts where the world is, the kingdom is brighter, which, you remember when I told you the story, that was the end of it. But it starts where the world is glowing over this writer that has given this new style of writing that has changed forever the way narrative will happen. And but the protagonist has yet to discover who she is and how she can become that in the world. And she actually only chooses her light at the very end of the movie. And all the beats in between are mixed up, but it makes sense to the actual story. So I see some comments. Anyway, I'll let you do that. So because you can meet the beats in any order, you can actually create a movie where a person can wander around and get one piece of this growth puzzle and put that in their basket. And then eventually they will come to an aha, all the pieces of why the character is the way they are and what's the belief that needs to be let go. That's all happening inside your viewer. And you could do that within the virtual reality where they get that much more engaged because they get to choose the rooms that they go into. Another, I was thinking about Blue Jay and how she's trying to figure out all the pieces. And you could actually sort of open doors, like there could be like a photo album on the shelf. And if you choose as the viewer to go to that photo album, then your protagonist on the screen has more information. And there would be an ending that includes her knowing that at that time. But you could always loop to the endings that you already had, because all of these pieces can be found in any order. So you could both have the protagonist included in this, or the viewer included in the story, but keep all the same elements because they can happen in any order. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was so exciting for me.
And do you think that will be something that you'll be moving into yourself? Do you think you'll be writing virtual reality stories?
I would love to be on a team figuring it out. Yeah, I think that would be super cool.
Well, we are called Collab Writers here, so you never know.
Yes, you never know. I'm putting it out there.
Putting that energy out there.
That's right. This is how it happens. No.
And the other thing I was wondering, Kim, as well, is you mentioned that you know, you, with the hero's journey, you have to go through the 12 beats and you have to go through in a particular order. Is it possible to write a virgin story but missing out some of the beats? I mean, is that a possibility, or do you think, you know, you need all of them in order for it to actually work?
I've always said, because I've been asked this before, I've always said, yes, you need them all. Now, some of them can happen just in a look, in just a nod.
Yeah.
And I've even seen some of them happen virtually, where it happened off screen, but everybody knows that that happened. But here's the thing. We are so used to writing hero stories that the beats that are crucial for understanding internal growth, if you're just following your instinct, you might choose those crucial ones not to do them. And they are the price of conformity, which is where we see or she sees that she is making herself small. Some people, those don't get included. The other would be gives up what kept her stuck. This is connected to the price of conformity, in that before you can choose to be yourself and to bring yourself to the world, you actually have to release the belief that made sense to you for making yourself small. You have to make space for that new growth. And those are very subtle ones, and you can't miss those and actually have believable growth on the screen. Too often people go from, it was hard, to, I think I'm going to change. And it's not believable. You have to know why that was really hard. Like, because often it just seems like, well, there's nothing really holding her back. There's some internal belief, and it usually is something around whether or not they're lovable. And then they have to choose for themselves that they're lovable. And then they can choose to take themselves in the world.
Interesting. So that kind of makes me think everything that you've been saying tonight also sort of leads me to think that each and every one of us at some point in our lives, maybe even every day, goes through some version or some element of the Virgin's promise. So it's almost like all of us have these stories within us to tell, far more so than one would with the hero's journey, for example.
Yes.
Because it is that intrinsic sort of internal experience.
Yeah.
So, we should, almost without even thinking about it, just by digging inside, be able to tell these stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we are in a time that is less dangerous than ever before. But our stories are and actually our work environments are acting as if we are in life-threatening, we have deadlines and all these things, like when really we want more creativity and innovation and connection, belonging, like these are the new things that are going to bring us forward. Transformation. We have this gift of not being in extreme danger until now with this pandemic. And yet it's something that we can't battle with our might. And this is what usually happens, is that when we get to the extreme where linear power no longer, that's what I call it, like the hero's power is no longer effective, then you switch to the other power that you've got, and it turns out to be a major gift. But what you said that really fascinates me is that this is not going to be a large governmentally organized, movement. This is, or hierarchically driven. This is going to be individuals finding their own sense of what makes a beautiful, meaningful life, and that being a little bit contagious, like, if I can use that word in these times. And actually there's a qualifier that goes with linear and circular, or hero and virgin power, which is to assert your will even against resistance. The shadow side of that is when you do it too much. And the light side of that is, well, shadow side is too much or too little. I call it the Goldilocks principle. The just right is in the middle. That's when you're in the light side. So that's where we're dealing with linear power, so hero power. For circular power or virgin power, the shadow is actually to be in a state of disconnection. Anytime you connect, then you are starting to move into the light and you can circle upwards. Even when you connect with your sadness, your depression, and you find ways to move it upward, then into places of reconnection, that's when you have found the light side. It's not good or bad. It's about consciousness around it. So I think in this time of crisis and need for transformation, it's those individual journeys that are going to bring us to this point of finding something that's meaningful and then sharing that in the world, which becomes contagious to other people. And all these little circles of growth are what's going to mean we actually go through a time of chaos, but they all connect and sort of, and in the way nature does all the time, find a new order.
The Kim Hudson order.
No, it's up to individuals, I tell you. I'm just spreading seeds.
Inspired by Kim Hudson.
Yes.
So it's feeling really powerful to me. So it's almost as if by telling virgin stories, that we can be of service to the world, that we can help others. I mean, there is, we're facing a mental health pandemic during this period and definitely afterwards because of what's happening. And it just feels that, your story structure and your, this way of telling stories could help future generations to come to deal with, whatever it is that they have to face.
Yes, yeah, and for us to find a place for a new form of power, to allow two ways of being to exist side by side. Like ultimately, I think we want to be able to recognize danger and defend against it, but also to figure out what is meaningful, what we love, what we want more of, and have structures that actually support that existing in the world.
Wow. Feels like we're sort of on the precipice of something very exciting.
Film writing or writing or in general has ever been as important, or hasn't been this important in a long time. And fiction, the stuff that's meant to be about the imagining of a world, or the story of an authentic expression about what's happening inside you. These things are what is going to inspire growth.
Definitely, definitely. And Kim, I'm conscious that obviously we've focused a lot on your book. The other thing I wanted to just probe with you a little bit is the work that you've done with American elders to protect their rights and that sort of thing. Do you mind talking to us a little bit about that, and how that has either influenced your storytelling or vice versa?
Sure. Yeah. So I was a land claim negotiator. So in Canada, we had this treaty actually in the very beginning, which was a peace and friendship treaty. So the Indigenous people basically convinced the colonizers that it's not about who owns what land, but why don't we create a treaty that just describes our relationship as friendship? And that actually is still on the books and has led to a lot of the enduring rights that Indigenous people have here in Canada. I would love to believe that it has colored some of Canadian policy in many areas. So I was part of the land claim negotiation when they opened it up in the 90s in the Yukon. And Harvard Getting to Yes project was, I'm sure most people have read that book. That was just new then, and we decided that we would follow that. So rather than being adversaries, we would be good people facing hard problems, that we were on the same side of the table. And that is basically a feminine style of negotiation. So right from the get-go, I had this experience of an oral culture which is human-based. And interestingly, that means that you naturally care more about relationships than productivity, that you think more about the meaning of the story than you do about the facts and the precedents of things going on. And yet I was with the federal government, so we were all about, we're going to need some results here. And I just had this experience between these two worlds, and it really stuck with me. So what I've done now is written a book on when I am working because I'm a geologist. I used to work in the field, actually. That whole remote areas, helicopter supported, grizzly bear country, literally. That was my hero side. So I work with mineral companies and First Nation governments, because now they have their settled treaties, and how to bridge their styles of thinking, basically. And that's where my understanding of power really evolved, was working with those groups.
It's so interesting. It's really different as well.
I know. Yeah, that's what happens. Like when you're driven by, okay, what's interesting to me, what's curious, what do I trust in myself that maybe I should go this way, even though there's no reason to believe that this is going to work out. You end up with this very diverse past. And yet I will say everything seems to have connected in some way.
Isn't that the most amazing thing about life?
Yeah, it really is.
Amazing. So Kim, before we move on to questions, is there anything else about the Virgin's Promise that you want to talk about or tell people about?
No, I think we certainly, I feel like it's been so much of me talking. I'm dying to hear other people's questions. That would be lovely.
Before we do that, Kim, I know that you have a website, which is storyarchetypes.com.
Yes.
And how do people get hold of your book? Is it on Amazon or?
It is on Amazon, and it's also mwp.com, michaelweeseyproductions.com. And I actually think they've got like 100 copies left. That's it. So
Okay, so there's 34.
I'm sure used bookstores are starting to have them, but there's no talk yet of doing another printing. It also is available in a digital copy, like Kindle, which I want to apologize. I had nothing to do with it, but there are apparently a million spelling mistakes in it, which makes it quite disruptive to read. But I hope people will persevere and get to the points that it's trying to make.
Oh, it really is a fantastic book.
Oh, I see there's an Audible question. No, it's not, but I will definitely do an Audible version of the new one because I love talking about it.
And you have a wonderful voice as well, Kim.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, questions, anybody? You can either put it in the chat, or if you put your virtual hand up, then I can unmute you.
Oh, I love it when people put movies that are good up. I will watch Half Nelson. Who is Joseph Campbell? I love it. You heard of me before you heard of Joseph Campbell.
Well done, Beatrice. I thought that would come from Beatrice.
Oh, that's great.
Anybody have any questions for Kim?
Can I offer something? People find it hard to ask questions. They're more in a state of having their breath taken away, or I'd love to questions or reactions, like what your thought would be, and by voice or by the chat there.
That's a lovely way to say it, Kim. Thank you.
New Waterford Girl is a film that I use in my book, and it's a Canadian film, and it is really good. And the author actually, they made a museum in Nova Scotia on her movie because it's filmed there. And she found out about me because my book got put in the museum. And she wrote to me saying, I just learned that you rated me and I only got 11 out of 13. And she wasn't that happy about that. And then she wrote me later saying, you're going to get a laugh out of this because the 2 beats that she didn't include got left on the cutting room floor. So she wrote them, but someone else took them out. So that was pretty good.
So we've got a question in the chat, which is, what are your top 3 favorite films that incorporate some of the concepts that you discuss?
So right now it is Joker and Jojo Rabbit. Joker, I resisted. I am not into terror or fear or those, and I was blown away. Like everything, the voices on the radio, it is about this incredible depiction of a world of hierarchy and how it devalues and dehumanizes people, and then what that produces. And I think for our time, it's actually exceptionally powerful because the Joker is played so humanly. So I highly recommend that one. I love An Education. I love Billy Elliot, Whale Rider. Jojo Rabbit, the little boy, is just he's so heartfelt. Even in his racism, he's heartfelt that you can't help but stay open-hearted to him, which I actually think is how we need to face racism. That if we push back against people, we isolate, we demonize, it is not an atmosphere for growth. And I think the movie Jojo Rabbit gives us that opportunity. So
it's interesting you say that, because I know in my experience with human rights, and when I was dealing with people with very strong views, it was often, by talking to them in a very sort of gentle way and trying to show them that there are other views, that it was the only way that they would possibly entertain thinking about something else. So yeah, totally with you there.
Yeah, I've seen it quite a bit where, there's a great YouTube. Beyonce's husband is talking about Trump, Jay-Z.
Oh yeah.
And he's basically getting goaded into trash talking Trump, and he won't do it. He said he's a human being, and we need to know that something has hurt him and made him the way he is. And it really made me a better person to hear him say that. I don't know if it helps with Trump at all, but it certainly inspired me to face people with compassion for their history.
Yeah.
So he may not have, like, I think when you behave that way, you cause growth in unexpected places all the time.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Pay It Forward. There's one where I felt like I was robbed. They told us that it was a story of learning to face things with humanity, just like we said. And then at the end, the message was, and if you do that, you're a total chump. That's what I felt, is that it did not go well for people. And I thought, you need to tell people up front that it's going to be a disbelieving thing. Otherwise, you sort of wound your viewer. So.
We've got a couple more questions coming in, Kim. One's from Tremaine. Will your new book look at foreign films which fall into the indie category?
Yes. I want to focus on that a lot. So, and please send me your suggestions. I Am Love is one. What is it? Another Earth is another great one. Yeah, there's so many. Yesterday, I'm in love with a lot of the Indian films. Yeah, so, but I'm totally open at this point. Good time to send me your favorite movie, indie film.
As if there'd be a place for French films as well.
Yes, my French, I know I'm Canadian, but it's not great, but I can read with the subtitles.
Yeah.
And actually, I've been watching a lot of Korean drama and love it. They really put the meaning behind things into their story, and then they find the moment where you can actually afford to say it, usually in the chooses her light part where the audience is ready for a really on-the-nose statement. So, okay, I'm writing these all down.
Got another question for you from Barbara. Is there a tip or recommendation you can give in the writing process when working out the beats in a Virgin story?
I think you're hinting at the cards that I made. I have these cards with each of the beats with variations on them, and you can actually flip through the cards and figure out, you wait for that resonance, wait for this aha moment. And then you can even change their order around. And I haven't been selling those, but I could put them on my new website if anybody's interested. Yes. Because you really do need a way to break away from the linearness of it. So that's why I created these cards. Elliot has suggested that I make them in a printable version so you could download them and print them in your own home. So I will work on all of those. But really just, I would recommend start by writing down just a stream of thought. Here's the story I want to tell. Then go to my book and find places where what you wanted to say is actually touched on in the beats that I describe. And then pull those out and then look at what's missing, what my book talks about that you didn't automatically write into the story, and see if you can relate to those parts as well. Never let it become a formula. Never let it drive what you're writing. Start with your authentic story you want to tell, and then see how it relates to a structure.
We're getting lots of votes for the cards.
Okay, that's a movie.
And would you say that there are many Virgin stories in the Scandinavian film TV series?
Wow. Name some for me. Oh, okay. What have I been watching? I've been watching Burke, the one about the president that's a woman. Burgoy.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's about a woman who is has more towards a socialist end, and she becomes prime minister, and all the structures around her are very linear. They're very fear-driven. They're they're masculine. So she is constantly fighting with her own values and finding places to put them in. So it's basically where you're cycling between when she figures she has to be linear and when she puts her foot down and is willing to risk it all to be herself, to follow her own internal sense of Borgen. That's it. Yeah, and that's one I am constantly fascinated with, the way they go between basically the two forms of power and have it pay off. But I will watch more Scandinavian film. Please send me titles.
So we've got a query from Anita. Can you imagine conceiving a story from reading your book rather than bringing a story to it?
Oops, sorry. I can, yes, because when you're reading it, what people often find is that it's said in a generic way, and then it activates an actual memory that you have in your life, or something that, even if it hasn't been something you've experienced, it's something that you care about. And so once that's activated, you know, really, and anytime you go through the motions of writing a virgin story, like, you can use the structure to build the muscle. And then when you face story ideas, you've got more aptitude for writing this kind of, letting your brain go in this direction. So I would say, write out the beat, watch movies and write out the beats that you find of the virgin story. That builds that muscle as well. Or decide that you're going to write one and do this beat, put something in there. That's what we do in my workshops. Basically just practice this beat. How would I fulfill that? And just keep moving through it. Don't worry about if it's good. Create your own secret world, actually. Like, give yourself permission to write a really bad story, but you're exercising your muscles in this world, because good or bad should not enter into your thought when you're in this world. Just either follow the guidance of the book or follow what it inspires in you, and try and take it to an end point, something that feels like a cathartic, yes, this is a full story.
And how do you, when you write stories yourself, Kim, how do you have a particular time of day, or do they come to you, for example, first thing in the morning, or do you just sort of get ideas anytime?
First thing in the morning. Yeah. I do believe that we are closest to our creative side first thing in the morning. So that's when my best writing happens.
You mentioned the artist's way, and I've personally been doing morning pages since May every day, and
Lovely.
I cannot believe how much has come through, how many stories have come through at that time.
Yeah.
And personally, I'm using it to handwrite just ideas for scripts, and it just feels like it's streaming through. And it's interesting because all of them have been virgin stories, all of them, without even thinking about them.
Wow.
And possibly a lot that comes through us is of that ilk.
Yes, I think it is the world we are experiencing, and the hero story, you have to get the call to adventure, right, to relate to it. Whereas we are every day in this journey to connect more to ourselves and be more authentic in the way we show up. So there is an unbelievable well of possibility within us. And there's place for everybody. Like, we need all of these stories to keep us moving in this direction of getting more close to each other and to our own sense of self.
Absolutely. Couple more questions here. Do you have any tutorials that we can watch online?
I just want to say hi to Caroline. She's here. Tutorials online. I did a what is that? The pandemic sessions that Elliot did in the beginning.
The lockdown sessions.
Lockdown sessions. So I did one on how a virgin structure goes with the pandemic. So that's available. free for members on the Rain Dance site. That, I think, is the only one that's actually available right now. There used to be on michaelweeseeproductions.com, mwp.com. I did a free introduction to The Virgin's Promise that anybody could watch. I haven't checked in a while if it's still there, so that might be worth checking too. Other than that, I just do interviews like this and workshops. Yeah.
Aren't we lucky? And how important is a routine in your creative process?
Okay, here's my theory. We need a container. You need to create sort of the outside where you know, like, I have this much time that I can let go of the rest of the world and just go inside and wander wherever I want. So I definitely create that container. I have a certain amount of time that I've set aside, or a certain space that I can go to where I know that I won't be interrupted. But within that, I actually let myself follow my bliss most of the time. Like I make sure that I'm just free associating, or that sometimes I just want to like cut and paste and do things. And it seems like I'm not doing much, but I am, you know, like it's building the stuff. But then I always make sure that there's a certain amount of time for writing. Like I need to make sure that the editing time, I'm going to spend an hour. I would say I'll spend an hour. And if it's flowing, it can turn into as many as 8 actually. But I always say I'll spend an hour so that you can always do an hour, even if you don't feel like it. And by the end of the hour, you'll know if it's the right moment. So that's about it for structure for me.
And sort of linked to that, Mimi has a question. How do you encourage those moments of synchronicity or intuition, the tingles that you spoke of at the beginning, where you know your energy has aligned with the moment? Do you think we can encourage them to happen or get better at identifying them?
Yes, particularly the last. It's about being, opening that part of your mind so that you're noticing. And it's really about grounding in your body, making sure that you're connected to what you're feeling in that moment, and not just the good feelings. It's important to notice when you're resistant, when you feel like you want to go to sleep, you know, like, and think about why, and take a moment for those things. And you will notice that you start to get better at feeling your feelings. And then it's like a superpower. Basically, you feel things bigger. You don't even have to think about it anymore.
And sort of on that vein, I'm sure I heard somewhere that, was it Jungian theory that suggests that the 45 minutes after we wake in the morning, that's when we're most open. So before the world as we know it, or our personalities have taken hold of ourselves, there is this 45-minute window apparently where we are open. And that's probably when, you know, morning pages is useful to do during that period, I think, because something comes in that is other than ourselves, so to speak.
Yes. Do you know that there's a TED talk by Elizabeth Gilbert?
Oh, big magic woman. Yes.
Yeah. And that's basically describes that. And I definitely believe that's true. I also believe that when you're, oh, there you go. Way to go, Cola. That when you go to bed, when you're going to sleep, you say to yourself, I want to remember my dreams. Or I want to, like, because I feel that we're more connected to that unconscious part of ourselves when we wake up with a bit of a memory of that world. And apparently you can even drink St. John's wort tea before you go to bed, and it helps you to be more connected. My daughter's studying this. But what I've done is my kids even know that there's this moment in the beginning of the day that you don't ask me to, you know, help you find your socks or anything like that. Something important, sure. But that is a magic time for what keeps us all going. You know, like, I need to be connected in that moment because we're all building on that.
Absolutely. So Simon has helpfully put a link into Elizabeth Gilbert's talk called Your Elusive Creative Genius. Thank you, Simon. And you can actually save the chat. So, so you can definitely get that at a later point. Wow, this is so exciting. So exciting.
How do you encourage following from Tammy? From Tammy? What's that?
How do you encourage following your heart more?
Yes, and that's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about vulnerability. That the more you follow, the more out there you are. And what I've learned about that is it just requires you to be very kind to yourself. The more we practice kindness to ourselves. And I was really shocked when I found out how hard I was on myself. I think, and weirdly enough, I think I was praised a lot as a kid. And that meant if I wasn't like amazing, I was like, oh God, you kind of failed there. So really kindness in your mistakes, it's almost like makes you stronger. There's got to be another word for that. It makes you able to be vulnerable and be out there and not be blown over when somebody doesn't like you. And that's the key, it's resilience. And literally resilience comes from Virgin's journeys. Yeah. It doesn't come from being a hero.
Because being a hero is, again, it's being lauded by the society, isn't it? You sort of come back and you save the world and it's all external.
Yes.
Whereas telling yourself you're good enough, and that even if, times are hard, this too shall pass and you'll get through it.
Or no matter what, I'm sticking with you. Like literally no matter what. I see good in you. You've done something that maybe wasn't great, but I see good in you and I'm still with you. Yeah. You're inherently, like, you have intrinsic worth. Can you imagine, like, going through life knowing that you are intrinsically worthy of taking up space and being loved and belonging? I think that's the ultimate.
Absolutely. I think you've sort of sent us all into a fairy tale. We're spellbound. So have you ever tried, just out of interest, have you ever tried sort of turning dreams into stories or encouraging lucid dreaming because I know Michael Weesey's interested in that kind of thing as well, isn't he?
Right. I had a family trauma that I decided to take my own advice and sort of welcome it, like figure out, okay, what does this mean to me? What kind of growing can I do through this? And out of that, one thing led to another. And I found an analyst in Geneva, which is like one of the really great things about COVID is that we can be on everybody's schedule now. Like there's time to do these things. So I have been exploring my dreams and I've been blown away by how much personal insight that it provides me. And yet I don't think anybody else would care. Like, like it's so funny. Like I feel like for me, I'm growing and unlocking, but I don't think sharing that, that there was a house and there was stairs missing. And I'm not sure how you would do that. If somebody if they could bring these two pieces together, I certainly haven't found how to do that, but I totally believe in the symbolism of dreams now. And I guess, actually several filmmakers have, now that I say it that way. The guy, the famous early filmmaker now that did dreams, and anyway, Alfred Hitchcock, he did it. Yeah. So it can be done. I haven't figured out how to do it, but I am such a big believer in the symbols of your dreams being, Tarkovsky as well. Okay, it's a very powerful area. I'll say that.
There's another film about lucid dreaming, which won a Raindance Award a few years ago, Zen Dog, Elliot. And that was definitely a Virgin story.
Cool. David Lynch, yes. And I actually am a guest lecturer at his school. So.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Rick Darge.
Yeah. And basically, Zen Dog is based around a lot of Alan Watts's teachings. So Rick managed to get approval from the family to use some of Alan Watts's recordings. So it's a really interesting film. You know, it's very spiritual, definitely a tale of spiritual awakening through lucid dreaming.
Oh, cool.
It's very interesting. Wow. Oh yeah, they're still coming.
I'll look at that one.
We're getting a lot of applause for a wonderful session, Kim.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be here. Oh, good. There's the trailer.
So I'm just scanning to see if anybody wants to actually ask questions. We're getting applause, lots of hearts.
It's funny, I don't know where all that is.